So, again, I would like to warmly welcome you. Please keep checking your chat section. Miss Yati is still asking those of you who've just joined to please tell us your name, where you're joining us from, and what it is that you do, and which organization you may be affiliated with. This is a networking opportunity and a connecting opportunity because that's really the purpose of communications in the very first place. And to kick us off, I would like to take you guys on a journey. Okay. So as I'm talking, I would love to know that you guys are in the story with me by using your reactions. So whether it's that you're thinking or whether you're like, yeah, wow, that is quite the statement, or whether you're feeling any of the connecting points. So just to be sure, I'd like to see that everybody is able to use all of their reactions. This is our bit of housekeeping to make sure that there's full engagement, because once we start this journey, there really is no turning back and it's going to move in a very quick succession. All right, so story come. So the reality of it is when we grow up, we all have this adventure, this spirit of adventure. We want to go places, we want to go and see things. And by show of hands, how many of you like to travel, or even when you were growing up, you had that anticipation for, I can't wait to go to the coast, I can't wait to cross borders, I can't wait to go across seas. Mimi naenda shule maju, right? And everybody has that journey of, I know where I want to go and how I'm supposed to get there. But by a show of hands, how many of you have seen the real logistics of actually traveling? Whether it's travel documentation, or whether it's being able to get to the airport on time or get to the bus on time, we've all experienced the challenges that happen therein, right? And let's be honest, for those of you who have traveled before, or you've had relatives or friends who have traveled before, you had an edge because somebody probably told you, you need to have your yellow fever card, you need to have a passport, you should probably have your ID or identification, you probably should make sure you use the expressway, or granny, prepare yourself to get there earlier because you'd rather be there early than late. By show of hands, any of you experienced those benefits of having uncle so and so, cousin so and so, friend so and so who's helped you out? Show of hands, thumbs ups. Wonderful. Yeah. And the reality of it is, this is exactly the same thing we're going to be talking about when we're here talking about the communication edge, right? There's so much complexity towards communication. And by show of hands, has anybody ChatGPT'd, Googled anything to do with how can I be an effective communicator? How can I be less nervous when I'm talking? How do I know somebody has understood me, right? We all go through these challenges. There wouldn't be such a big search option if there really wasn't anybody else who was facing the same challenges. And this is one of the reasons why I invited and created this webinar. And to introduce myself formally, because now we're at a small critical mass, my name is Joy Thuo, and one of the things that I do is I am the Chief Operating Officer at Osotwa Lagoon. But as most entrepreneurs would know, it's the Chief Everything Officer, especially when you are a small size business, meaning that I oversee and support a lot of my team and create a lot of these activities. And my main passion is really in interpersonal relationships and upskilling people in terms of understanding the usefulness of soft skills, or rather what is known as executive functioning skills. So for me, in terms of the shortest distance I have had to travel today, I feel like I have traveled the globe in trying to get all of the feedback that you guys have given us during your Google form when you signed up for this webinar. We are so appreciative of those of you who took the time to tell us where your main areas of concern are. And our speakers today are very ready and excited. They've met you already by virtue of the questions that you have shared. And I would like to introduce at this juncture my co-drivers. One of them might be the other conductor in this bus. The other one is the navigator. Okay, but in real sense, I am the navigator. You are all the driver. Where we are going, we will find out at the end of this conversation. And I'd like to introduce them one at a time. Our first speaker is going to come on and put on their camera and show us their wonderful face. And the first person is Brad Eliot, and he's going to introduce himself a little more. And the next speaker is Mary Gitari, and you can see their wonderful pictures here as they are putting on their cameras. And what we'd like Mary and Brad to do as they're introducing themselves to you is to basically tell us who they are in relevance to the topic of conversation and what their organizations do and why they are the people to go to and listen to in this scenario. So Brad and Mary, karibuni sana. Please put on your cameras and your microphones so that we can see you.
Thank you, Joy. Hopefully you can see me.
Yes.
Great. So as Joy said, my name is Brad. You might be able to detect that I'm not from Nairobi. I'm actually originally from Manchester in the UK, but I've spent more than half of my life traveling the world. One of the reasons why I wanted to travel was because I wanted to understand people. And you can't understand people without being able to communicate effectively with them. So I really followed my passion in terms of communication and travel and meeting people. So for the past 25 plus years, I've been training people all over the world in how to communicate effectively, both whether it be in English, other languages, in a corporate setting, in a private setting. So I'm really basically passionate about effective communication because I feel that it's the only way the world can improve. If we can talk to each other honestly, clearly, effectively, that's how things get better.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we really are here to improve and get better, become edgier. And Mary, would you like to please introduce yourself so that we can see whether you are the co-driver or the conductor in this conversation?
Thank you so much, Joy. I'm just checking that everyone can hear me. I'm audible. Perfect. Now, raise your hands if you've ever seen a vuvuzela. Vuvuzela, anybody? Great. At least Karen has, and Brad. I am like a vuvuzela. I love to amplify stories and I love to dig up interesting facts about people, about the products they sell, about the companies they run. And I've been doing this for 20 years. I have been running my PR firm called Brandspark PR for quite a bit of time now, maybe over 10 years. But I've been in the communication field almost 2 decades. Now, if you see me, I might not look like I have all that experience, but I can assure you that if you Google me, you will find me somewhere in the archives of the 90s, somewhere. And I have loved telling stories for a long time. So, as you've heard, Mary Mutanu Gitari.
All right, I think we have a small break in the communication, which is normal and regular. And if you are feeling humorous, just indulge people by just laughing a little bit so we know we're talking to somebody. But basically, Mary is also from Brandspark PR. And basically, as she said, a lot of what in terms of sharing stories and knowing what people do and being able to explain and share the journeys of some of the most phenomenal things that have happened. Actually, they are one of their team members is part of the team that built the Nakumat brand. So yes, they really are on top of their story and their journey and created the slogan, if you need it, we've got it. Yes. So welcome everybody. And as we move this conversation along, the first thing that we would like to hear from Brad as we start the conversation, and any of you are also free to write and give your comments in the chat section, and any question that comes up as we're moving forward, is what And why does communication count? Why does every single bit of communication count whenever there is a business interaction or engagement, Brad?
Thanks for that, Joy. It's a great question to kick us off. If you think about it, we are what we do consistently. And essentially, if we're always communicating, and whether we're conscious of it or not, how we communicate, what we say, what we don't say, basically makes part of who we are. It sends messages. And often we do this unconsciously, right? So whether you're talking individually or within a business situation, a professional setting, how you speak to people, how you listen is a reflection of who you are, who the company is that you're working for, or the one you created, and you in the wider society. So that's why it's essential, I think, really.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful perspective in that you've tied in where everybody comes into play. And in terms of interpersonal dynamics, I think this is a very underrated point in terms of everybody thinks that it has to be the main component, that either it's the big project and it's not the subtle in-betweeners, in between meetings and the brainstorms and the conversations. And also relationally, if you think about it really, when you think about your friends, when you think about your family, it's never really just the one big dinner party. It's the conversations that happen in between. And in all reality, especially when we're talking about building your confidence and also being able to clarify how you're able to speak up and be very specific about what you're trying to say, it's understanding that there's a lot you're supposed to be learning about the person who you're talking to. And there's a lot that can inform that to make your conversations more concise, or making sure that the statements that you use are more aligned to the personality that you're talking to. And this always entangles even in terms of how people have a general perception of when somebody asks about you in terms of public perception and your reputation. If I ask about Brad Eliot and I'll be like, oh, so he's that white guy that talks in a bit of Kiswahili, and there's a lot that actually gets undertaken outside of bigger conversations. And that's one of the first components we'd like to give you as a hack. The trick towards your communication edge actually starts in understanding that it all counts. It's every little bit of pieces that actually come together in one big reveal or a big hurrah that, oh, I actually got heard this time. I actually got seen and understood this time round. And Brad, with that, I think my next question would be to make sure we're all on the same page. And please feel free to vent if you need to. How do you know when your communications are going wrong or right? Because I think it's an understated statement when we say that. I want to be seen, heard, and felt. And I know we're always touchy about the feelings part when it comes to work environments. But essentially, why is it supposed to be necessary for you to know that your communication has either gone right or gone wrong?
Thanks, Joy. Yeah, I mean, obviously, basically everything is feedback, right? So if you make a statement or try and make a joke and people don't laugh, or the point that you're making, people answer a different point, they're talking about something completely different, which can often happen. This is all information that what you said is not resonating with people. You're not connecting with people. You're not building that rapport with people. So when things go wrong from a communication perspective, it's a signifier that there's something wrong with the relationship, maybe. And the way, because obviously the way we communicate with each other is such a fundamental part of, this kind of relationship that we have. So I think that's the most important thing to think about when you notice. Now, obviously, you have to be aware and start to actually open and look at people. Like, I've done a lot of training, and I always know by looking at people whether they're engaged with me, if they're fiddling with their phone, if they're looking outside, if they're whispering under their breath. This is all information that what I'm saying is not connecting. And this is especially important, I think, if you're a leader or a manager, as a lot of the people on this call are. You know that, okay, I'm trying to communicate my big idea about the next push of our business, and people aren't even listening. That's why it's important.
I love that you've brought in the component of what is the ideal. And I think this is where dynamics can come into play, and why I was bringing out earlier the significance. And even as Brad is talking about the relationship and how you're able to have that awareness and connectedness towards whoever you're talking to. And one of my main components when I talk about understanding the situational context is what I'm referring to as the dynamics, is that even within the leadership component of, okay, maybe the significance of the meeting is that, no, there shouldn't be people who are talking on the side or people who are making jokes. And also knowing within a different setting, the necessity of having somebody who is laughing and giving eye contact. And for those of you who have just joined us, we've been asking that you connect with us by using your reactions and primarily being able to understand how you connect. And there's a lot of undercurrents in terms of how to connect with people in the very first place. And I think this goes a lot to a lot of your questions in terms of how do you build that confidence and how do you reduce the nervousness whenever you're having to think about your communications. And one point that I'd like to add to that is being able to understand whenever you're talking to a particular person, and this is relates to Brad's point on feedback, it's understanding the person behind this conversation, that it's not just this mask that's in front of me. And even as Brad talks about, like sometimes you're not quite understanding what point is being made, or you are realizing by somebody saying something, they're not understanding what you're saying. There's an internal conversation that's happening on both sides. And being able to even understand that, for instance, right now I'm very nervous, so I might ramble sometimes, and then sometimes I catch myself and have to slow it down. And to add to that, to ask Brad to give us a practical example of when feedback has been useful and how he's managed to actually see how when people are taking in feedback, what's the way and the best way to actually receive feedback in the very first place, whether it's by verbal or non-verbal communication, so that somebody knows what they're walking into anytime they're having a conversation.
Okay, so the question is about, if I've understood you correctly, Joy, and this is a technique that you can use in communication. If something's not clear, you can ask the question. Is your question about how you notice someone, like how you notice someone that's not understood and what do you do? Or is it more about the person who's not understood and what they do?
Both. You can start from how do you notice it and then how do you adjust to it.
Okay. So I think it's interesting when I looked at the survey questions and what a lot of people said, that they were like, one of the biggest one was about themselves being overwhelmed, right? And the feelings of nervousness and anxiety and tension that you have entering a conversation that might be difficult or something like that, right? So that, not only is it bad for you in terms of being nervous and that affects how you perform, it also takes you away from being able to listen, to notice other people. So the fundamental thing, and I actually have a question for you, maybe you can put it in the chat. When you're communicating with someone, who is the most important person? Is it you as the person speaking, or is it the person receiving the information? So put you or them in the chat, and let's just see what we say. I have an answer to this, basically, and I think this kind of ties into it. This will answer your question, Joy. And have a think about it. There's no chat yet. Them. Someone's put good. We have a them. Okay. Now, if most of you are going to put the receiver, them, the other person, whatever it might be, okay, that actually is one of your solutions to your own nervousness and overwhelm and tension. Because by thinking about what's important for the people that are listening to you, the person that is communicating with you, it takes you out of yourself, okay? And that allows you to then notice when people are not with you. If you're communicating with someone and all you're thinking about is getting your ideas across, then you're not looking out for those cues, those signs that they're not with you. So that's the first thing I would say. Think about the recipient, then make them the most important person, and that will then allow you to notice their feedback, whether it's non-verbal or verbal.
Right. And I love that you bring that out. And we're going to welcome back Mary. Mary, is there anything you'd like to add as we're continuing?
No, I'm happy, Paula, for the network issues.
It's all right. So I think to bring in Mary in the conversation, since we've heard quite a bit from me and Brad, Mary, in terms of your experience, whenever you are helping people in terms of having to give out their story and go directly, and I think this is a personal question I would have. Does this relate to teams as well as it relates to external parties in terms of being able to even make proper decisions on what type of communications are you supposed to be having for people to know about you, to represent yourself well? How does this matter, and why does that feedback also matter?
I think just to focus on the first section of the question, the most important thing about understanding the elements of your story are asking, what is it that I really want to say? So being clear on the expected output. As Brad has said, a lot of us are very closed and shy, and we'll talk about personalities here, where you are conscious about, I don't want to overshare. I don't want my business out there. I don't want, in Africa, we have this saying, kizuri chajiuza, kibaya chajitembeza, which means if something is good, it's like you build it, people will come. And that's the greatest misunderstanding of the power of communications in organizations, because we are veiled by this cultural thinking that I shouldn't be telling people what I'm about. And therefore, if we can first identify that that is a myth, especially in business, then we can get to the second part of even figuring out what is it that I want to say. So in my business, I have had to help people learn that and teach them a new narrative. We will be quiet when we are rich, or we will be, because it's all about business, and business is about figuring out how to attract more customers to you. So if customers don't know who you are, what you do, why you do it, there's no way they can connect with you. So for you, Joy, I would advise you to write down those 3 things. We always start with 5 questions, 5 W's and 1 H. Yeah, the 6 questions. So who are you? What are you? Why do you do what you do? How do you do it? Where do you do it, and when? So that's just a tip, and I think we can continue building on that. Let's first
Yeah, I love that you brought that context out. And I was really hoping you're going to say that, because sometimes when I'm helping teams develop and understand how to share their story, and I think in terms of being in the employment space, people always think that the story is just for the business owner. And so the way you end up talking to a company around the whole conversation on, yes, it's your customer. Sometimes I also like to remind employees, your customer is your employer. You need to also step up and step into sharing that I am able to do this, or I want to learn how to do this, and I want to go in this direction, so that you become the main point person. So even in terms of answering the 6 questions that Mary is talking about, who is needed in this conversation? What are they supposed to be able to do? How can we actually collaborate or engage to make sure that this happens? And in terms of where Brad was coming from, it's understanding that these are the bunkering points that allow you to create your clarity. When you're able to have a full picture of what is it that we're supposed to be engaging in the very first place, it also helps you to compose yourself, to think about, but where do I come in? The individual. And a question in terms of being able to relate and understand, and this is actually a question we had led on our social media, in terms of why is it so hard to lead conversations in the very first place? Yeah. And I think my question to both Mary and Brad, before I give my lens of perspective, is, how do we manage our personalities? I mean, we've talked about the nervousness, and we've talked about, yes, we should focus on the other person and being able to even get out of our bodies so that we're able to adjust to the person that we're talking to. But how do we really adjust to personalities? And if you could add on, particularly personalities that don't match with yours, because I think that's usually where the break in communication comes, because you either want to shut down, you want to push away, you feel like it's not worth the risk to actually go out there. So Brad and Mary, whichever one of you would like to answer, feel free.
Maybe I can go first, Mary, and you can chime in if I miss anything. So there's two parts to your question, right?
Yeah.
It's about personalities. One is how do you manage yourself, and one is managing the other people, right? So obviously it's a massive thing that we talk about a lot in the coaching industry, in the self-development world. You have to know yourself first, understand what kind of personality you have, because it's normal that we tend to get on well with people who are like us and who like us, right? Whereas people who are not like us and we don't particularly like, or we don't know yet, we tend to get on less well with. So first of all, you've got to understand yourself, and understand yourself on both sides of the coin. So a lot of people who say they're not a good public speaker or they're afraid, that is one way of distorting reality. Just in the same way with there's someone who's got a massive ego and says, like, I am the best public speaker in the entire world. You know, too much confidence is one distortion of reality, and not enough confidence is the same. So actually kind of be clear on where your strengths lie as a communicator, as a person, as a leader, whatever it is. So the first question is know thyself. Then you can start to look at other people. And maybe, Mary, I don't know, one of you chime in about how you can connect with other people who have got different personalities from your own.
I think the answer is in what you said, Brad. Just understanding that your communication is mostly about the other person. You're hoping to achieve a particular objective, and in an office setting, in a team setting, I think we were talking about this earlier, there's always I, you know, the way they say there's no I in team, TEAM, but there's an I, there's always individuals. So many individuals make up a team in an office. And each of those personalities, you know, can clash or can go together. As Brad has said, the organization, the we, takes up the personality sometimes of the CEO, or I don't know, it can be a mix, but most times they take up the personality of the CEO. And then there's the them, you know, the people who we engage with, our customers. And if you look at those three circles, you want to ask, what is it that really benefits us, all of us, the me, the we, and the them? Because then that's is what is going to help you along with the business to achieve your business objectives. So in a nutshell, I think that it is important to understand that beyond my personality, my own personality, whether I'm an introvert or an extrovert, how I turn up, we can decide as a team how we're going to show up to them, the customers, the stakeholders we're dealing with. And that can be curated. You know, you can have almost like standard operating procedures where you say, when we pick up the phone, we will smile. Why? Because we are an organization that exudes joy. So you can actually predetermine the personality that you want your organization to have that goes beyond your own individual personalities. Again, what is the purpose that we're together? It's because we want to grow as a business, to grow our business, right? Joy,
Yeah.
this is your area now.
Yeah, it is. I love a lot of the things that both of you have said, because I think within the interpersonal connection, this is usually where things get very foggy. And in terms of like in this journey, this is where I would say for those of you who have traveled to Rift Valley, you know what the fog looks like when you're going down the escarpment, either early in the morning or at nighttime. Or for those of you who've traveled and it's raining, you really can't see what's going on. And primarily because there's what you like, which is what Brad talked about, and like attracts like. Yeah, I know that's not a physics way of thinking of things, but the reality of things is, when you find somebody who you're almost more or less, it's not hard to mirror each other. It's not hard to copy each other. You're rolling off and finishing sentences together. Collaboration is so easy. But in terms of like my line of work, it's also understanding there's differences, even just from an industry or a technical service perspective. Like, for instance, the way lawyers talk is the way lawyers talk. The way accountants talk is the way accountants talk. The way marketers talk is the way marketers talk. And there's always going to be that mismatch. And unless you had a lot of experience, more times than not, and this is actually why people have a preference towards some people to enter some stages of leadership, because of that experience. So, hi, those ones of you who've been asked, we need to have 25 years experience in a line of work. It is actually for a reason, but it doesn't mean that even within your young age, or when you're starting out and at any company level, any consultancy level, that you can't have an edge. And that's primarily what this is, yeah? Giving you the tips to understand that to adjust towards the culture, you also have to adjust to what is your areas of growth. And I will always give my personal example of being an introvert. For many people who know me, nobody ever really believes that I'm an introvert. But I had to measure down in terms of the most basic thing that I can connect to somebody. So more times, and this is a very big tip for guys who struggle with small talk, and what is the necessity of small talk? Small talk creates foundations to understand people. So being able to talk points on, okay, if the conversation is stalling, talk about the dog. Yes, if they really liked the dog, talk about the dog. If they really like money conversations, talk about your whatever context is on money, whether it's about Elon Musk, whether it's about Rootonomics, talk about something that basically can diffuse the tension, can bring both of you to a common grounding to be able to understand each other. I always like to say those mathematical terms were actually not for nothing. Lowest common denominator of conversation is what small talk is about. And in terms of being able to now adjust to different personalities, when you find the lowest common denominator, it's easier to actually piggyback off that and use a technique such as mirroring. If they say this, as Brad said, if you're not understanding the question, ask the question back. If you feel like you've not understood each other, sometimes take a step back and move the conversation forward, which is primarily what I'm supposed to be doing. And one of my questions that I have for both Mary and Brad, but I'll start with Brad specifically. If you were to say that there is a component of breaking down how to talk clearly and how to even shorten your sentences or make your points more compact so that you're delivering a punch, that somebody is able to understand it without rambling on, what would you say would be the top tips that you'd give somebody?
Thank you, Joy. This question is very close to my heart because obviously I come from a different culture than Africa. And one of the things that I've noticed in my many years living here is that people in Africa tend to take their time getting to the point, right? And in fact, looking at the feedback that people came up with, one of rambling on and not knowing when to stop was one of the things that people said they need to work on, right? So this is very close to my heart. I'm very keen on getting to the point in my very Western way. I think the first thing that you can do is get clarity in your head. Before you start to communicate, think about, do I have this clear? Because actually, interestingly, I was reflecting on this earlier. The lack of confidence and the amount of rambling, they're correlated. If you're not feeling confident and sure about a subject, you're more likely to ramble on, okay? So the first thing is basically checking what you know and sticking to that, being clear on what you know. And then the magic is, of course, how can you communicate that in a simple way? The biggest tip that there are many, many tips that I can give you. The biggest tip that you can do is what we call employ positive constraints. So very often when you ask a question, people start talking and they don't say how long they're going to speak for. I'm going to talk about 3 things. Just be concise, get it clear in your head, give positive constraints, and then use simple language. You don't need to show how amazingly articulate you are in this language. The simpler the language, the better. Those are my 3 top tips. And notice that the positive constraints are used in that communication piece.
Wow, isn't that amazing? I can't promise I'm going to use that right now because, again, we are all here just making do with what we've got. But also to validate what to add to what Brad's point is, and I think as I'm also moving to the next question, is being able to, and I think Chris is the one who's asked, mentioned this, in terms of the bigger, what did Chris say? The bigger the claim, the bigger the brand, and they got the biggest stage, right? And I think sometimes, to summarize what Chris is saying in short, is the risk component. Yeah, that sometimes you can be the most confident that you actually think you are. And then somehow when you get to whoever you're talking in front of, it all kind of implodes, or like it falls apart before your very eyes. And that in itself is also very nerve-wracking. I think in terms of being able, and one of the things and the tips I give towards team collaboration and why you need that ecosystem support, whether it's the person who is cheering you on in the audience, or also giving affirmation and reassurities towards, even if you tank this, or even giving a measure of what is actually making this go wrong. Like, what's the worst thing that you could say? What's the worst thing that you could do? Or what's the worst outcome of this? And is it really going to crumble the whole company? Is it really going to be a make or break? And I think for me, Mary, one of the questions I'd like to ask you in terms of, or even Brad, you can comment on this one, is the question on assertiveness, right? When you have to actually give this point of your conversations and you're breaking it down, you're trying to be firm, but you're also trying to be friendly, but you're also trying to encapsulate everybody around you. What would you guys say has been your experience? And I'd also like you guys to talk about your business experience in terms of either working with other consultants or working within your businesses, in terms of how this affects your decision making as you're either giving instruction to your team or you're having to weigh the risks when you're having to deal with a client and you're talking about sensitive matters. How would you say somebody is supposed to weigh your authenticity in terms of your assertiveness and how it actually applies to your decision making?
Maybe I can chime in. I think it's really difficult as a woman to have, first of all, that word assertive is always misunderstood in settings where women are leading, is what I'd like to share my experience with. And I find that women who are cholerics, they are very extroverted first and foremost, and very clear on what it is that they want to communicate, are always misunderstood because, again, culturally, women are put in this box where they're supposed to be smiling and soft, and they're not supposed to do certain things when it comes to how they communicate. So there's some unwritten rules about what to expect when women are speaking. And I found that the greatest tip is always empathy. Asking yourself, how am I feeling about this particular topic? Why do I want to be assertive about it? And we especially give this tip when communicating with the media. This is for CEOs who have very strong points. Maybe they are defending themselves. They've been accused of something that they have, they need to clarify. And you find a journalist who is coming at them in a certain way, and they have to take back that credibility, that authority, and become very assertive about what it is they want to say. So whenever my tip to anybody when I'm teaching them how to speak to the media is use facts as much as possible. A lot of assertiveness will disappear if you leverage emotions, but if you use facts, then people cannot argue with facts. Then the second tip I always give is, what is the solution that you are hoping to get out of whatever you're saying? So, for example, in my personal experience, when I'm dealing with a client who has refused to pay me, for example, I want to leverage the relationship in a way that I don't lose out, I don't break it off. That's my objective. And I want to come off as assertively as possible to say, you not paying me has impacted my business in the following ways. These are the facts. Or we signed this contract, you promised to pay on this day, and this hasn't happened. And therefore, these are the following steps that I'm going to take. So not coming off as if I am being aggressive or fighting and being not in control of my emotions, but yes, using facts. So I think Brad has a different experience being a white male in this market.
Brad, anything to add?
No, 100%. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned the bit about the women tendency to people please. There's actually a communication quiz that I do in my company about your communication style. And one of the communication styles that comes out is called amiable, which basically means likable, friendly, warm, fuzzy, and that kind of thing, no? And that is often in sharp contrast to people who are perceived as aggressive and assertive. And you're right, there is a gender balance, maybe even a race balance in this one. I think the first thing to think about is, what is your goal? And often when we talk about meetings, I know, Joy, you do a course on effective meetings. Sometimes we confuse what the point of the meeting is. Is the meeting to build camaraderie amongst the team? Is it about getting everyone to be friendly and liking each other? That's one objective of a meeting, right? You can have that. You can say, okay, listen, guys, let's just have a bit of a joke. We can talk about various different things. Or is it to get things done? And often we conflate these two things. So we have a bit of fun at the beginning, and then 45 minutes have gone and said, oh, by the way, we need to get this and this done. And that comes off as too aggressive because you've spent 45 minutes building rapport. So the first thing is, what do you want? Do you want to build rapport and community, or do you want to get things done? My biggest thing about this is about, as the communicator, if you're going to take the lead, you set the frame. This is the meeting. I've called a meeting today about this. I'd like to talk about these three things. You haven't paid me. I'd really like to get paid, and I'm sure we can find some, mutually agreeable solution, because I know you like our services. I like you as a customer. Let's see how we can move forward, which is basically where you reach a shared goal. Or you can say, this meeting is about, I want to get to know you better. Let's build some relationship. Let's build rapport, and let's have the warm and fuzzy, things. So I think setting the frame at the beginning about what you want to achieve is fundamental.
I love that. And I think to pick up from that point of the conversation, there are a few particular things that both Mary and Brad have said that are influencing, or rather talking about some dynamics that we also underrate, in terms of, you need to actually take the time to set what Brad is calling the frame. And this is one of the reasons why collaboration, understanding different personalities, having the subject context of what you want to say and how it's supposed to come out and whether it's being understood matter. And one of them, Mary already has alluded towards it. Aside from personality, there's always the gender component. And there's always also the authority component. A good dynamic I like to talk about, and this also came up on our socials in terms of people sharing their experiences, is what does it look like when you're talking from the top to bottom, and what does it look like when you're talking from the bottom to the top? Yeah, whether you're a lean company or whether you're extremely hierarchical, there's always going to be that dynamic of how does communication flow between the different roles in an organization. And just like Mary had talked about in terms of being able to understand and where you feel like you're being defensive, either because it's the standard operating procedure or this is just the way it's supposed to be, there is the context. And as Brad has now broken it down, you have to have the framework in terms of what conversation are you trying to have? And I think sometimes in terms of my first statement when we started this conversation, I talked about communication being multi-layered, right? And again, for people who don't like small talk, you'll need to understand from a context version of the culture, the person. Where do you start building up the confidence and the rapport? And how long is too long in terms of building up the rapport that you don't actually end up getting to the point? Or how little rapport have you actually established that you've actually not created a good, cozy environment for the conversation you need to have? So, I mean, this comes down even to bare minimums of greetings, even just checking in with people. Where is your head at? Are you tired? Did you take long to travel from wherever you are going and where you are coming? What is your background context, right? So that's like a bare minimum foundation. And like Brad had given the example of if somebody owes you money, maybe for instance, if it's the first conversation, it may not be the best time to decide to go gung-ho, and now you want to almost create a fighting energy with somebody. And I think in terms of the modern day context of feelings and emotions and mental health wellness, it's also important to always bring out the point on validation. Yeah. Even if you're going to use what Mary said, which is relying on the facts, the facts being the context, the framework of whatever is creating your relationship or whatever your conversation is supposed to be, you need to always be very clear about what is it that is somebody's experience, and being able to validate that without it also watering down the context of the conversation or the point that needs to be landed and resolved. One of the points that I always bring out in my meeting transformation is, does your conversation actually ever end in a conclusion? Because sometimes we get wrapped up in a big part of the conversation in terms of the feelings and sentiments and structures, and this was how it was supposed to be in terms of technicality, and you're forgetting the human component and also the resolve that needs to be gotten to at the very end of having a conversation. So in terms of like being able to tie in a neat bow what Brad and Mary are talking about, it's always being able to create the framework, being able to understand the multi-personality, gender, culture, different components that are there, and then being able to say, but this is the facts of what needs to be ticked off at the end of this conversation. These are the emotions and feelings that I can actually adjust towards. I may not have to agree with them, but I do understand them from a logic perspective that yes, you're angry, yes, you're irritated, but maybe in best practice, you shouldn't show your irritation. You shouldn't shout, or you shouldn't talk down at somebody. And point for that one particularly, the question on whether you should give the honest, brutal truth. Nobody said honesty has to be brutal, guys. Yeah, you can actually be kind in the honesty that you give. You can actually be able to talk within a context that makes it not fluffy and rainbows and those type of things, no, but it can get to a generalization of I respect you, I see you, we're gonna get done what actually needs to be done, and we can do it together. So yes, Mary, before I go to my last question. So, and guys, before Mary talks, please write your questions in the chat section so that we can feel free to write the question. And if it's specifically towards somebody, or if any of the points are resonating, please also tell us so that we know that you're engaged and that we're actually hitting home. Remember to use your reactions. Thanks, Mary.
I think, Joy, you've struck such a chord with me when you've talked about having those very difficult conversations. And I know that Brad is an expert at this. And I considered an assertive conversation where I need a raise. That is something that I think I think we're going to talk about the session we're having on Friday. But I think that one of the benefits of coming to these sessions is we help you to get a voice and to learn how to speak regardless of your generation. We've talked about only two differences here. We talked about gender differences, we've talked about race differences, but there's also generational differences. And I'm imagining how there's such a clash right now in the business and in the office environment, in the corporate environment, because there's a Gen Z who's asking, why can't I just be honest about the fact that I think all meetings should be an email? And a Gen X who's like, I have to see you to know that you're working. So there's such a turmoil at this. It's like we're in a very big crossroads right now in this generation, because so many undertones have come to the fore, and would love to help you to break some of these things down. Brad does a course called Having Difficult Conversations, and Joy is an expert in helping teams to break down all those layers and bring to the fore how we can really, really have impactful communications where people feel very comfortable to be themselves, not wear all this mask where they feel I have to speak in this certain way so that I can be heard. So we're not asking you to pretend. We're asking, how do you build on these skills so that you can achieve your goals? So I think that's one of the things that I wanted to bring out. And I'm wondering, how
I
do we
love when you
even
start
do
that conversation from, right? It's such a big conversation. And guys, again, I told you, this is just the journey. This is the beginning of the journey, right? By the time we get into personalities, by the time we get into some of the main components, as Mary has now brought in the age component that's supposed to be there, what we're giving you are bare minimum tips, yeah? And I think in terms of understanding the culture that's there, in terms of you have very short attention spans and you can only consume X amount of information for X amount of time. It's also being able to understand that to be able to do some of these things, you need to backtrack conversations. So if you think about even the way we've modeled this conversation for today, we've had to go from the very beginning of, does every conversation actually count? Why is it supposed to count? Who is supposed to be inside it? What are supposed to be the components that you're supposed to be figuring out as you move forward? And just to move aside from just thinking about it from, I like the example Mary gave, which was on the salary bit. This also applies to how you talk to your customers in terms of being able to bargain, in terms of being able to negotiate and say, actually, in terms of service and value that we're giving, this is actually the real mark of things. And I think for my context of dealing with teams and some of the places where friction comes in is whenever people are having to have the hard conversations about value, time, and the compensation that's supposed to be there, right? And whether that's supposed to be intrinsic, like it's actually cash money, or whether it's supposed to be in kind, even in terms of small things like respect, being able to be moved to the next ranking as you're moving forward in your career progression. It's important to be able to always understand that this is actually where you can get the tips to be able to do that. So that when you're having the preliminaries of a conversation in service offerings, know where you're starting from. If you're talking about you want to be raised in terms of your role in an organization, how do you start that conversation? And a big pinch that I know a lot of bosses fight back on is, but the company is also the value to the team member, and they should also know that we are contributing to them just as much as they are contributing to us. And the hack of it is that you have to know that it's a flow. There is a symbiotic relationship in terms of everybody needs the other person. And in terms of us going into the wrap up and last question, and I'm seeing there's no questions so far. Guys, are we hitting enough? Can we get any reactions from you guys that have we answered any questions? Are we making any points? Is anything resonating? Or are you busy making dinner, lunch, you're doing bath times and you're trying to adjust to the friction of getting at home? Hello. Yeah, we've got about 30 people on the call. So I really do hope you're all there and hanging on by a thread. We're just about to finish. Thank you, guys. So my last question that would be there for us in terms of having this conversation is being able to consider that there must be a main strategy. Like, what's the one strategy that you would really say, whether it's about talking to yourself from the internal perspective, Brad, or Mary, whether it's talking about what are the main components you need to think about when you're doing the external conversation, and whatever tip that I could probably give in terms of a strategy to work out the interpersonal, whether it's from yourself to the next person, to the external person. So I'll give that as our wrap up statements. Anybody would like to chime in?
Yeah, happy to, if I may. Okay, so I think I've got a question for the participants today, and I want you to go away and think about the answer to this question. And it's linked to this idea of labeling ourselves as certain things. I'm an introvert, I'm an extrovert, I'm nervous, I can't do this, I can do this. These are all labels, right? That can become sometimes self-fulfilling prophecies. First question is, do you think you can change? Do you think that communication is a skill that can be learned? Now, it may surprise you to know that I wasn't always an effective communicator. So for me, I believe that I can change because I've seen it. I've seen myself grow as a communicator as I've gone through my various businesses and work experiences, etc. So the first thing is, do you really believe that you can change? And if you do, and therefore hopefully you will agree that effective communication, whether it be to the media, within a team, with one person, it's a skill that can be learned. If that's the case, then basically you've got one of the keys to effective communication, because you can be flexible, you can adapt. If you've got someone like me who likes to speak direct and get to the point, speak direct and get to the point. If you've got somebody who wants to talk about the family and things for 15 minutes first, do that. Even if maybe for you, you wouldn't like to do that, okay? And that is an evidence that you believe that you can learn and grow and develop this skill. That's my final point.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Brad. Mary?
I also want to draw from my experience. I have seen people who've said they cannot speak in front of anybody, let alone the media, let alone the stakeholders, like give a speech in an event. And after just very little training, they then transform into this amazing person who can even give jokes and can be listened to for 10 minutes continuously as they give a very engaging speech. And that earns them credibility, it earns them trust. And so for me, the benefits of learning communication and having that as a skill for yourself, for your business, for your whatever it is, whatever you want to do, your career, I've seen those benefits and I think they're worth going after, because that one thing could be just the key that could unlock the next step of your life. So I really want to encourage you guys to do what Brad is asking. Just ask yourself, what is stopping me from getting this key to unlock the next stage of my life? And how can I acquire these skills? So we're here to help you. We've seen so many people change and achieve their goals. They say that people who know how to communicate you basically can earn more money and you can achieve 90% of your goals with just this one skill. So what's stopping you?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Brad and Mary. And I think to wrap it up, I'll leave it with 3 particular statements. After you've answered Brad's question in terms of, can I change? Am I willing to change? What is this label on me? My question would be, are you going to learn from whatever is your answer? Yeah, because the biggest component of this, and this is unfortunately one of the biggest problems in the day and age of too much information. There's a lot of information going around, but whether we are actually learning, and I'm going to add my next 2 points towards the learning part, is, are you actually implementing? And to be able to say you're implementing well, there's 2 things that you really have to do. Yeah, to actually say you are a proper learner and practitioner. And the first one is, you have to have a consistency in what you're practicing so that you can have a curve that basically allows you to say, I learned this, I tried this, I've tried this, I've tried this. And what normally people give me as feedback in terms of consistency, that yes, I've tried many times, I also bring a challenge in terms of what types of trying are you doing? Are you doing small iterations, or are you doing like overhauls? Because one of the things you realize is when you overhaul everything every single time, you're creating a new environment that you need to adapt towards. You need to learn how to make small changes, small iterations, so that you know what is it that is creating your improvement one step at a time. So you know what to keep and you know what to discard. You know what to keep, you know what to discard. What works for this person, what works for this situation, what works for whatever context that you're supposed to be in. And now the last part is what I'm here to also share with you. When Mary keeps alluding towards, we have this activity that's happening on Friday. I think for those of you who are trying to find a safe space to practice this, not just within the context of your meeting room or with your team engagement as you're trying to brainstorm some of these things, or you're trying to work out your next deal and get the money that we are praying for you to get in Jesus' name. One of the things is, where can you actually practice these things? And we actually have a special opportunity that's coming up this Friday from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the evening. And what we're inviting you to, and I'm just gonna share the poster right about now, is we're inviting you to our open day. Because much as you've heard a lot of the things that Brad, myself, and Mary are talking about in terms of the context of the questions you've asked and some of the pain points we know people face in communications, we are trying to bring out the practical component of it. Like Brad talked about, there's an assessment tool that you can actually learn your communication style. There is other tools and other activities that we bring out. For those of you who have done team buildings with Osotwa, you know the practical activities that we correlate towards actually seeing your behavior in real time as you're engaging in an activity. And basically, it's simple things that are light, that are easy to engage with, that are very practical in terms of hands-on experience to know what to do exactly. And we're giving a one-time offer, or rather, it's not a one-time offer. We're going to do it again. But yeah, please join us for it. This is what the poster looks like. We are going to be sharing this in our post communications. Misiati is also going to send a link in the chat box right now. Please, please, please give us your feedback, because we will not know how to improve or how to also fashion the next webinar that we'll have on communication. And like we said, we are willing, and like what Mary said, we're willing to join you in this journey to enhance your communication skills, to build up, to grow. And yeah, like Mary says, we've had a lot of testimonials and we'd like you to be one of them too. And with that, I would like to bring this conversation to a close, especially since there doesn't seem to be any questions. But we do have we're 5 minutes over. So if anybody really needs to drop off, please feel free to. But please, again, give us feedback. The link is on the chat section. If there's anybody who has a pressing question they wanted to ask instead of type, please raise your hand and just ask. But otherwise, so far we've come to the end of our wonderful conversation. Please give a round of applause to my guest speakers. And I have been your host, Joy Thuo. Yes, there is the link to the Google form to give us your feedback. In the feedback form, you can actually check off whether you want to come for the open day or if you're just interested in the workshop that's going to happen subsequent to it. Again, in terms of the open day, we're actually having a 1 hour session on the actual experience of what the workshop would be. So come, please. Sandbox iko wapi? We are going to share the location. We're in Kilimani, behind Yaya Center. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Don't need to come by yourself. Come with your team members, your colleagues, anybody who is really curious and wants to get into a safe space and a practicing environment with like-minded and supportive technical support. So that's it from us. If there's no other questions, we are happy to have you drop off. But again, one last go. We really were that efficient that there were no questions. We really answered everything that you had asked. For real, for real. Thank you, Joy. Anybody else who's good, please give us a thumbs up before you drop off. But yeah, otherwise, we're gonna stop the recording there since there's no more questions. But please, we do look forward to interacting with you via email, via WhatsApp, If there's somebody who you know you had shared this invite to and they didn't manage to get the link, please ask them to just WhatsApp us. Miss Yati is sharing the WhatsApp number so that they can get access to this video and they can also see the future opportunities that are available. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening and rest of your week. Please go and prosper in doing better communication and helping other people communicate better. And we look forward to engaging with you in future. So have a good one, guys. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.